Hi, this is Greg. Here we are back again. We're going to talk some more about the Henry Big Boy Revolver. So some may say it's just not historical for a company that makes lever action rifles. And I say, well, not exactly, maybe historical fiction. But you know, the single action army you see in the westerns only had a run between 1873 as far as the military and then 1892, and that's when Colt came out with the new army. And superficially, that new army looks a lot like the Henry, and it was a double action revolver. Now in 1907, Colt came out with the Official Police, which was a scaled down version of the new Army. Now I do not have one of those, but I do have a Smith & Wesson hand ejector made in 1901, and these came out in 1899. They were 38 special, side loading, no shroud for the extractor, but you can see some of the similarities of the guns from that time to the Henry. And eventually, and down in the 70s, 357, Colt came out with what was called the Colt Lawman, and it almost looks like the twin of the Henry. Wow, I like that sound. So I would say that the look Henry was going for was the look of the double action revolvers from the late 1800s and early 1900s. And I also have to say this, we think Wild Wild West, ended at 1900. No, it didn't. You still had bandits, you still had rustlers, you had Mexican revolutionaries, you even had a band of Apache Indians holed up in the Sierra Madre Mountains who were still raiding settlements and ranchers up until the 1930s. And then in the 20s, you had the rise of the motorized bandits. I see this as a gun, historical fiction, as H.R. Funk would call it. That's what he called the TSOS tank commander, something that could have been, should have been, And I see this as historical fiction, but something that Frank Hamer, the Texas Ranger who brought down Bonnie and Clyde, might have carried. I see this as the kind of gun that perhaps Jelly Bean Bryce, the gunfighter that J. Edgar Hoover recruited to help his agents combat the motorized bandits. I see this as something he could have carried. All right, we've talked about history. Now let's talk a little bit about function. A lot of people are a bit upset because there is no shroud to house the ejector. And of course, in days gone by, there's the possibility of that extractor getting bent. But if you're not going to be pistol whipping anybody with your gun, you're probably not going to have to worry about this. Plus, this extractor is very beefy. I don't think it would take quite a lot to bend that. Now, as far as lockup goes, there is a ball detent on the crane that helps lock the gun in and helps give the gun, stability. So I don't think not having a shroud is going to hurt this gun. Now let's talk about something else, more cosmetically. Some people have said that the bluing is very cheap looking. I don't see it. It might not be quite as lustrous as the old Smith & Wesson bluing, but it's certainly the same bluing that you see on the Henry rifles. And I have to remind you, there's not too many revolver companies making blued revolvers anymore. Smith & Wesson does the classic series, but the bluing's different from what used to be. So now that we got some of those things out of the way, I'm hoping next video to do more shooting. Maybe compare it to a Smith & Wesson, an older Smith & Wesson Model 15 Combat Masterpiece. And talk about some of the issues that I've found with this gun so far as the performance. And this is Greg with Lionquest Fitness reminding you, always be prepared for the unexpected.